Okay. Alrighty. Or already. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected in some form. We are or connected to climate change in some form. We are talking about climate change. And pretty much everything everything on the planet is connected to climate change. Everything we do is somehow connected to climate change. What's up? What's up, people on Rockfin? I'm on Rockfin live now. ROKFIN. Got some people watching. Please come over and say hello to me on Rockfin. So I can read some chats on Rockfin. Anyways, the early chatters are in on the YouTube side, and welcome all. Hello, people. People talking about coronavirus and people talking about knowing people who have died or who have gotten the coronavirus or gotten sick with the coronavirus. Hold on one second. Let me make sure everything is on. Everything is on. Okay. I know people who have gotten the coronavirus, and I know people who have had family members pass on because of coronavirus. I was thinking today, I have a question. You know, people kind of ask you, or people wonder, you know, do you know anybody who has coronavirus who has died of coronavirus? And I think we all have. Most of us. How many people know people who have been affected by climate change? How many people know people who have lost their homes, lost their jobs, had to move, had to leave, had their lives impacted in some way or another by climate change? Does anybody know anybody who has died of climate change? Anybody? And I don't ask this to take away from the seriousness of coronavirus. I'm just linking the idea that we have an existential threat, much larger existential threat coming our way in the form of climate change. You know, coronavirus, some people might think coronavirus is bad, and it is. It is when people are dying. Michael Tracy was commenting on the fact that some people were saying that somehow this year, this was worse than World War II or even World War I. You know, somebody commenting on what a crazy, terrible year this is, who's getting their food delivered from Grubhub, settling down for a night of Netflix. Yeah. For some people, coronavirus has been difficult. Some people are losing their homes. Some people have lost their jobs and their livelihoods, and that is messed up. A lot of people are able to weather coronavirus in relative comfort. So is it the calamity that stacks up to other calamities of history? You know, we shall see, because more shall be revealed, and we haven't reached, I think, the apex of the fallout from coronavirus yet. Kevin Chanholzer says, I know someone who's been affected by climate change. I know a couple of people, um, and a couple of people in these chats who have been affected by climate change. And what about the people who are affected by, like, psychologically by the specter of climate change? Just as the people who grew up in the Cold War or in the era of the nuclear arms race, even when I was a child, I was born in the 60s, late 60s. When I was a child, I was deathly afraid of a nuclear war. And so that has a psychological toll, right? So people who understand what climate change is and what's happening and can see it for what it is are experiencing psychological damage, right? There's a psychological toll. Kiro Hikes, millions die every year from climate change. In 2012, it was estimated 12 million a year. 12 million a year. And so there's a stat we can go with right there, right? Estimated people, even if it was 2 million a year, that's still more than have died from coronavirus this year so far. And obviously, other ways that people die, coronavirus doesn't stack up to many other ailments that that can take people out, right? People have brought that up plenty of times. Like, there are things that we're killing ourselves with, or that we are succumbing to, that are just as horrific as coronavirus, and yet we go, anyways, carry on, humans. Peggy Gravel says everyone at my coffee shop is testing positive. Oh my. I would not be visiting that coffee shop. I'd be maybe taking a hard right, finding another coffee shop. At least for the time being. I'm Sweet Leaf. I am PTSD from climate change. Moses says my dog had coronavirus. Really? Fun facts worth supporting. Apparently dogs can get coronavirus. Osama says still afraid of nuclear war, accidental or on purpose. I am too. Absolutely. I'm sure many are. I mean, we have a normalcy bias, right? If things remain normal, we just assume that things are going to remain normal. That some calamity can't come over the horizon at us real fast. Interglacial Optimist says 2 of my friends are mortgage lenders, and they're having the best year of their lives. Yeah, for some people, the coronavirus has been a boon, or has been a positive for their lives. Other people somewhat neutral. Other people, feel it's the worst thing that's ever happened. Well, of course, to them, it's the worst thing that has ever happened. So, that's all that really matters, right? If it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, then that's the biggest thing that you can focus on. Pre-trauma. Osama, pre-traumatic stress disorder, yeah. We've done a lot of talking. Hey, people on Rockfin, hi. Sorry, I've been ignoring you. We've got Snake, 1974 on Rockfin. Ken Greenfield. Osama, Sweetleaf. Urban Hermit. Ryan Gorman. We got some folks. We got some folks over on Rockfin. But thanks, Sweetleaf says, I am PTSD from climate change. I think a lot of people are. Sure. Trauma, trauma, trauma. Rich Diana, many are losing their housing due to COVID. Sure. How many people have lost their housing due to climate change in the United States in the last couple of years? I wonder. I'm not to conflate the two at all. I understand people are losing their housing due to coronavirus, and that's really sucks. But I'm just saying nobody's talking about people losing their housing due to climate change, or that doesn't seem to be as much of a focus, but it should be. Interglacial optimist. If everyone cancels their health insurance, we can watch Medicare for everyone show up within a month. That's a great idea. That is a great idea. I like it. Everybody cancel their health insurance and just show up at the hospital waiting for some help. Imagine how quickly Medicare for All will be passed. Yeah. Anyways, let me get into this because it's getting far too deep into this video, and I haven't really talked about anything yet. We've just been kind of discussing random things. I did start late though, however. So let's start with this. This is from The Guardian. A warning on climate and the risk of societal collapse. Really? Societal collapse, you say? This is from December 6th on Sunday. Scientists and academics, including Professor Gesa Weinmeier and Professor Will Steffen, argue that we must discuss the threat of societal disruption in order to prepare for it. Gosh, I wonder what other scientists have been talking about that. Right now we have a brand new duo of scientists talking about this. But golly, no other scientists have been talking about this in the past? Wow. As scientists and scholars from around the world, we call on policymakers to engage with the risk of disruption and even collapse of societies. After 5 years failing to reduce emissions in line with the Paris Climate Accord, we must now face the consequences. While bold and fair efforts to cut emissions and naturally draw down carbon are essential, researchers in many areas consider societal collapse a credible scenario this century. This century, you say? So that still sounds kind of far away. You mean like later on? You mean like 40 years from now? You mean like 80 years from now? Are there researchers in many areas that are considering societal collapse in the next decade? 2 decades? But they had to put the soft pillow on this a little bit, I guess. Different views exist on the location, extent, timing, permanence, and cause of disruptions. But the way modern societies exploit people and nature is a common concern. You don't say. Only if policymakers, but modern societies exploit people and nature hand over fist, and yet we seem to think that the way that things operate right now is a really good way. It's the best way. It's it's just a lot of well-meaning, well-intentioned people making the system run the way it does that's, mostly pretty good for people. Is it mostly pretty good for people, or is it exploiting people in nature to the point that we're causing possibly a societal and or environmental collapse? Which one is it? I wonder. Only if policymakers begin to discuss this threat of societal collapse might we begin to reduce its likelihood, speed, severity, harm to the most vulnerable, and to nature. Only if policymakers begin to discuss this. Are any discussing this? Some armed services already see collapse as an important scenario. I would say most, if not all, probably understand. Yeah, they're all sharing the same intelligence. They probably all know what's going on. That's why the conspiracy is not that climate change is a hoax, but that it is far worse than they are willing to let you know. We read that. Sadly, this is the experience of many communities in the global South. However, it is not well reported in the media and mostly absent from civil society and politics. People who care about environmental and humanitarian issues should not be discouraged from discussing the risks of societal disruption or collapse. Ill-informed speculations about impacts on mental health and motivation will not support serious discussion. That is correct. Ding. So if we're still living in we got this, we're going to stay well under 2C. If we're still living in that scenario, guys, if we take really strong measures and large steps over the next 10 to 20 years to lower our carbon emissions and switch to a renewable economy, then we might have a chance. All of that is just absolute hogwash. That is ill-informed and propagandist on some level. That risks betraying thousands of activists whose anticipation of collapse is part of their motivation to push for change on climate, ecology, and social justice. Right. Some of us believe that a transition to a new society may be possible that will involve bold action. Those are the words I was looking at. Bold action. Sounds so decisive, Sounds like people have a lot of agency in this bold action. It sounds like we could take bold action and our entire government apparatus wouldn't get in the way of us taking bold action by arresting us or silencing us on social media. Bold action to reduce damage to the climate, nature, and society, including preparations for disruptions to everyday life. We are united in regarding efforts to suppress discussion of collapse as hindering the possibility of that transition. Whammo. Right on the money. However, people have been, again, I don't know who it was. I don't know who it is. I'm not sure. Can't put my finger on it. I believe some people have been talking about this for a few years. Some of us believe that a transition to a new society may be possible. Anyways, we are united in regarding efforts to suppress discussion of collapse as hindering the possibility of that transition, right? So if you're not telling the truth about climate change, you are withholding the possibility that we could actually make informed decisions about the way forward around climate change. Because the discussion that we are allowed to have right now is the same as having no discussion at all. In other words, we're going very quickly into a brick wall of reality. And all of this, like, we're going to set net zero goals of 2050, and we're gonna, spend a lot of money transitioning to a new renewable economy. All of that discussion is literally the same as having no discussion at all. We're just leading in people into a brick wall. Tell people the truth and allow them to decide on the best course of action. We have experienced how emotionally challenging it is to recognize the damage being done, along with the growing threat to our own way of life. We also know the great sense of fellowship that can arise. It is time to have these difficult conversations so we can reduce our complicity in the harm and make the best of a turbulent future. No doubt. Sounds pretty logical to me. Osama over on Rockfin says we are currently at 2C, above the 1750 pre-industrial baseline. Next stop is 3C in 2021. All aboard. And Osama also says having backups is key, indeed. As in having a backup channel where we can talk about climate change, a la Rockfin. Yeah, some people are saying that we're currently at 2C above right now, or that we're anywhere between 1.5 and 2C, which belies the idea that we're only at 1C. But that's only compared generally to it's generally compared to like a 1980 baseline, or even going back as far as 1950. If they allow for that, then that might be a 1.1C or something like that. But if you want to go all the way back, we have 94 watching on YouTube, 34 likes. Please like up the video. And if you are new, you know what to do. Forcing Climate Info says, nothing to do about climate change. A new scientific paper realized 2 weeks ago. Okay. We are doomed. Only thing we can do is follow. Scott Andrews. I don't know if this is going to be my last live stream. Doubtful. But would it surprise me? No. Yeah, lightning rod, not if you use a 1990 baseline, then we're not even at 1C. Brian Melt, is it really your birthday? Happy birthday, if so. Oh, Brian Melt sent me a more red flag warnings for this area, for Southern California. It was really windy and very warm last night. Strangely warm for December. It was windy and in the 60s and very, very low humidity. That has kind of carried into today. It's fairly warm. Looking at my thermometer, it says 80 degrees. Low humidity, some winds. It's good wildfire season. Let's move on to the next thing I want to cover, and the next couple of things. I got to make this quick. Interesting. This is an interesting article, and not far off of the general idea I have been espousing on this channel. You know, the jobs is actually what's killing the environment. So maybe we should not worry about jobs so much and worry about people having food and shelter and medical care. Let's take care of people and not worry about people having jobs so much, because we're going to have to lose a lot of jobs in order to save the environment. That's just math. David Graeber says to save the world, we're going to have to stop working. You don't say. Writing as part of Jarvis Cocker's big issue takeover before his untimely death earlier this month, David Graeber explains his confusion about why we destroy the planet if we don't have to. This is from theBigIssue.com. I'm the big issue. I'm just going to assume that means climate change, or is it some other issue, or is it all the big issues? Our society is addicted to work, says David Graeber. If there's anything left and right, both seem to agree on, it's that jobs are good. Everyone should have a job. Work is our badge of moral citizenship. We seem to have convinced ourselves as a society that anyone who isn't working harder than they would like to be working at something they don't enjoy is a bad, unworthy person. As a result, work comes to absorb even greater proportions of our energy and time. Much of this work is entirely pointless. Whole industries, think telemarketers, corporate law, private equity, whole lines of work, middle management, brand strategists, high-level hospital or school administrators, editors of in-house corporate magazines, exist primarily to convince us that there is some reason for their existence. Useless work crowds out the useful. Think of teachers and administrators overwhelmed with paperwork. It's also almost invariably better compensated, right? The useless work is compensated better than the useful work. As we've seen in lockdown, the more obviously your work benefits other people, the less they pay you. Funny how that works. The system makes no sense. It's also destroying the planet. If we don't break ourselves of this addiction quickly, we will leave our children and grandchildren to face catastrophes on a scale which will make the current pandemic seem trivial. If this isn't obvious, the main reason we are constantly encouraged to look at social problems as if they were questions of personal morality. All this work, all the carbon we're pouring into the atmosphere must somehow be the result of our consumerism. Therefore, to stop eating meat or dream of flying off to beach vacations. But this is just wrong. It's not our pleasures that are destroying the world. It's our puritanism, our feeling that we have to suffer in order to deserve those pleasures. If we want to save the world, we're going to have to stop working. Tell me more, David. Tell me more. 70% of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide comes from infrastructure. Energy, transport, construction, right? Doing things and making things and building things and having things and buying things. Most of the rest is produced by industry. Meanwhile, 37% of British workers feel as if their jobs are entirely unnecessary. If they were to vanish tomorrow, the world would not be any worse off. Simply do the maths. If those workers are right, we could massively reduce climate change just by eliminating bullshit jobs. So that's proposal 1. I like this. I like this a lot. I co-sign this. Proposal 2, batshit construction, right? Which is really prevalent in China, but also prevalent all over the United States. I see so many buildings and housing developments and, just all kinds of stuff under construction. Just build it because we need the investment opportunity. We need to, get this investment money going. We need to, money to change hands and people to be hired and, blah, blah, blah. An enormous amount of building today is purely speculative, right? All over the world. Governments collude with the financial sector to create glittering towers that are never occupied. Empty office buildings and apartment buildings and houses where people could live. Airports that are never used. Stop doing this. No one will miss them. If we don't, or roads, that need to be built, that don't need to be built. If we don't break ourselves of this addiction quickly, we will leave our children and grandchildren to face catastrophes on a scale which will make the current pandemic seem trivial. I just read that. Proposal 3, planned obsolescence. One of the main reasons we have such high levels of industrial production is that we design everything to break or to become outmoded and useless in a few years' time. If you build an iPhone to break in 3 years, you can sell 5 times as many than if you make it to last 15, but you also use 5 times the resources and create 5 times the pollution. Logic. Manufacturers are perfectly capable of making phones or stockings or light bulbs that wouldn't break. This is true. In fact, they actually do. They're called military grade. Force them to make military grade products for everyone. We would cut down greenhouse gas production massively and improve our quality of life. These 3 are just for starters. If you think about it, they're really just common sense. Why destroy the world if you don't have to? What a painfully obvious question. If addressing them seems unrealistic, we might do well to think hard about what those realities are that seem to be forcing us as a society to behave in ways that are literally mad. I would like to add a number 4, and that is develop technologies that don't need to be developed. Right? There are so many things that are just absolutely, just pretty much useless, that don't need to be made. Gadgets and inventions and, so many things that are just useless items cluttering up people's homes and lives and stores, etc. Lastly, in this video, I want to quickly talk about Trump, the Trump administration that is soon to be over, as far as we can tell. Trump administration declines to tighten soot rules despite link to COVID deaths. I find this headline a little bit strange because soot kills people without COVID even being part of the picture. But they say this stuff to make it seem like, or I think they say this because they think it's going to get people's attention, because people are more worried about COVID than they are about pollution or climate change. So if they're worried about dying from COVID, then they should be worried about soot, but they should just be worried about soot anyways. So I like that. It's a nice little psychological trick they're trying here, but why not just allow people to be concerned about dying just from pollution, or talk about it? Health experts say the EPA decision defies scientific research showing that particulate pollution contributes to tens of thousands of premature deaths annually. And those deaths have nothing to do with COVID. But I guess, because they could, it suddenly makes it much more, much more imminent or something. Anyways, the Trump administration on Monday declined to tighten controls on industrial soot emissions. Of course they did, because of course they did, because they're the Trump administration. Disregard any emerging scientific link between dirty air and COVID-19 death rates, or how about dirty air and just people dying and just dying, heart disease, lung disease, etc., etc. In one of the final policy moves of an administration that has spent the past 4 years weakening or rolling back more than 100 environmental regulations, and they did do that. They did that. An Environmental Protection Agency completed a regulation that keeps in place the current rules on tiny lung-damaging industrial particles known as PM 2.5, instead of strengthening them, even though the agency's own scientists have warned of the links between the pollutants and respiratory illness. In April, researchers at Harvard released the first nationwide study linking long-term exposure to PM 2.5 and COVID-19 death rates. But we didn't really even need that study. See, that's an example of a job that just didn't even need something that didn't even need to happen, because we already know. I mean, it's fine. Yeah, okay, they did it, and we knew. So they're telling us something that I think people could have just suspected anyways. So somebody had to do it because somebody needed the job doing it, And that was a waste of time because we already know that long-term exposure to PM 2.5 causes what? Death of all kinds of things. And we'll just throw COVID-19 on top of that. Yeah, so yeah, you know. Trump trying to do all the things to destroy the environment on the way out. Opening up Alaska to mining and drilling and oil exploration and all other manner of, you know, whatever, because the economy is more important than the place where we live or something. I don't know. Kuro Hikes, no one has stolen more from anyone than the capitalist Americans. Indeed. Ask the indigenous people of America. Indeed. Alhemf says, is there vegans in the military? I don't know. I'm sure there are. Probably not a lot, though, right? Creative experiments. Capitalism is theft. That is the definition. Indeed. Everyone needs a need, right? We got to cut down these trees that belong to, well, they belong to us now. Make this stuff. Sell it to other people. That belongs to us. The money we made from selling this stuff to other people, that's us. That's ours. We made that money. But the trees, that didn't belong to anybody, that now belong to us. Anyways, guys, that's about all I wanted to talk about today. Thank you guys for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. And I don't know if I'm going to be back later with another video, possibly. If not, I will be back tomorrow at the usual time. Osama says he's worried about the soot deficit. Right on. Osama also has a quote from Leonard Cohen on Rockfin. Take the only tree that's left, stuff it up the hole in your culture, says Leonard Cohen. Thanks for hanging out with me on Rockfin, guys. I appreciate you, definitely. And thank you all for hanging out with me on the YouTube side as well. G. Demarest, there was a fire last couple days ago that I talked about, the bonfire in Orange County. I don't know if it's still going on. They're shutting off power. So the bonfire in Orange County is 55% contained. Multiple homes have been lost, though, if you didn't know that. Sure, I'll talk about this fire before I go. The bonfire in Orange County, 55% contained. 30 structures were destroyed. Thanks for asking. Yeah, that happened, but that's been going on for a few days. But they're shutting, so there's a kind of a red flag warning. So they're shutting off power to people in wildfire-prone areas. I guess 70% containment on the bonfire now. Yeah, so not a lot of wildfire action happening besides the bonfire, but the bonfire. But they are expecting anything at the moment. Preparing for anything. Anyways, guys, thanks so much. I will see you on the next one. Until next time, peace.